So this is an article on the Blaze. For those unfamiliar, the Blaze is a news organization, let's say, founded by Glenn Beck, the talk show personality and former, I believe he was a host of a TV show on the Fox network. But it's basically an article which sort of coagulated several different heartfelt replies to the issue of same-sex marriage legalization in the United States. The article was called, or is called, quote, "This is a monster of the government's own doing. Blaze readers react to the Supreme Court's landmark battle over same-sex marriage." The Blaze posted a story earlier this week featuring highlights from the landmark Supreme Court battle over same-sex marriage. The case of Obergefell versus Hodges will have a profound impact on the ability of states to define legal unions. Arguments show that the justices are divided on the issue. Some appear to show they favor legalization of gay marriage, while others appear to show concerns. Here is what some of the readers of The Blaze had to say about the issue. Cavallo. As years go by, it seems the SCOTUS becomes more and more of a super legislative council with the lords appointed for life. Many of their musings, arguments, and debates are less on the constitutionality of X, Y, and Z, but on society's benefits or detriments of their rulings. I would just like to add in a personal note that my personal opinion on the matter is we have amended the Constitution many times since its original signing. There is no reason to believe that it would never be amended again in the future, given the precedent of past amendments. Now, not all past amendments were good. For example, there was prohibition, which was later repealed, so to speak. But this concept that we can't amend the Constitution has been proven false. The Nannerpuss says the SC Supreme Court should not be ruling on this. This is clearly a states' rights issue. The people should decide this, as they have over 30 times, defining marriage as one man, one woman, not unelected lifetime appointed judges. Once again, it comes down to, I believe, what is considered, because there was a good point here with the Supreme Court or the federal government sort of interfering in states' issues, states' rights. But, for example, if we look at the split of the Union for the Civil War, this was primarily about slavery, but it was also a lot about states having their more rights. In other words, the federal government having less power and the states having more power. The southern states wanted to keep more power in the states, and the northern, not the Confederates, I forget, the Yanks, let's just call them, they wanted to give more power to the federal government. Now, what happened in the end was the South was defeated, and we ended up with a slightly larger federal government and also abolished slavery. Now, you could say that, of course, the South was wrong for the fact that they supported slavery, but as you can see, this is a very divisive issue in the United States about which rights states should retain and which rights the federal government should or has the power to exercise. So it's a delicate balancing, in my opinion, and I'm not really swayed either way. I do disagree with the whole concept of lifetime appointed judges, and I believe that they would do better to only serve terms rather than become essentially some sort of like a monarchy almost. You have these supposedly democratically elected representatives in there for life. We put term limits on the presidency back in the 30s or 40s when Roosevelt was president, so that would be during World War II. Moving on, however, Zoito says, a person I spoke to recently admitted she was all in favor of redefining marriage. After all, she claims, we haven't redefined it in centuries. That is a terrible argument. I'm in favor of allowing gays to get married, but that is one of the worst arguments I've heard for it. Well, we haven't changed it in centuries, so let's change it now. How does that work? I said, okay, let's redefine it to mean 2 adults. What happens when someone wants to redefine it to 3 adults? We don't let them, was her response. Why? I asked. And crickets. Obviously, someone who wasn't very researched on their opinion on the matter. Polygot says, Justices Sotomayor, her name is Sonia Sotomayor, and Ginsenberg should rescue themselves from this and any other case surrounding gay marriage. Both of them have officiated at gay wedding ceremonies. How in the heck can there be any question that they not only support but participate in the furtherance of the issue? The SCOTUS is just another example of corrupt government. Okay, I could play the opposite card in that why should any justice who has officiated at a straight wedding ceremony because they're going to be biased either way, right? Why is one bias okay just because it is a more traditional view? I don't understand that line of reasoning. Mick Christian says, I will go the way of thinking as stated in the Bible. I don't even know why you'd bother publishing that opinion. It's not an opinion. It's basically, I'm a Christian. Woo! Salamander 2 says, instead of changing the definition of marriage, why doesn't the Supreme Court do the right thing and suggest that Congress and the states adopt language that recognizes quote-unquote dual partnership at every place the term marriage is mentioned in the tax laws, property rights, etc.? It still isn't too late to correct the movement. It isn't marriage, but it is a partnership between 2 people conveying all the rights and privileges and responsibilities of marriage. In every instance marriage is mentioned in the legislation, either federal or state, it is to be replaced by marriage or dual partnership between natural persons. This eliminates aberrations. It conveys all rights. It doesn't upset the quote-unquote settled social science of marriage. The LBGT movement has taken a wrecking ball to societal norms, and this is wrong. This is actually a movement that I am in favor of. The fact that we should just abandon the term marriage altogether in the political courts and define it as a domestic partnership or something, and confer rights previously only conferred on married people to people in a domestic partnership, and just leave marriage to the religious to regulate. R. Vic says, if the courts are allowed to simply add something into the Constitution that was not previously there, then what is to stop them from simply removing something from the Constitution that's been there all along? Okay, now, I have to admit my knowledge is a bit lacking in regards to who can amend the Constitution, and I believe it's not the courts who are allowed to. I think it has to go through the Senate. So yeah, that is an important part where sort of the courts are just overriding the legal the check and balance of other legislative branches to just change the Constitution. That would usurping your or over exercising your legal power is definitely a risk. It is a problem that we need to address if it's happening. to ensure that the Constitution, or that the United States checks and balances are actually not put in place, but that they exist and that they are being used, that they're not being co-opted by either the president through executive actions or the Supreme Court. Kathy 1104 says, at its core, gay marriage is an affront to nature and nature's law. As you can see here, a argument based on the fallacy, the appeal to nature fallacy, that if something is natural, therefore it is good, therefore it is moral. And nothing really could be further from the truth. If I made the case that rape is natural, then this person would agree with me in saying that it's okay. You see what I'm saying here? Because let's say, oh, it's just natural for men to want sex, even because they generally have higher sex drives than women. So, rape, it's natural. Just like, but so that's the problem with that argument. But she goes on to make a better point, saying that it produces nothing good for society. There are many things that do not necessarily produce a tangible benefit for society, but at the same time are not illegal. For example, you could take the legalization of alcohol. Being allowed to drink is often more detrimental to society than it is beneficial, but we've tried regulating it, and it hasn't worked. It instead created another black market, encouraging criminal activity in cities like Chicago. So just because it produces nothing good for society that you see tangibly doesn't mean that it should be illegal. Therefore, it could just merely exist, where it has some downsides and it has some perks. For example, the happiness of the individuals involved, you're not taking that into account. So for them, it'd be personally good. Why? This is sort of undermining the rights of the individual, right? Basically, if it's not for the greater good of society as a whole, you would be against it. In other words, sacrifice one for the many. If you believe in God, His word calls homosexuality an abomination that flies in the face of His command that we should be fruitful and multiply. If you believe in evolution, homosexuality, I'm just going to put ality at the end of that, is a bane to the species because it does not promote survival of the fittest. Now that is a common misconception about evolution, that the Darwinian theory of evolution is what it should be also applied to more social studies of it. Basically what this means is that all our laws, if you believe in evolution, our laws should mean that they should always favor survival of the fittest. No compassion, no welfare for the less fortunate, let's say, or the ones who are ill, they have terminal illnesses, and basically it's a very cold and heartless social policy. And the vast majority of atheists who believe in evolution would never support such a policy. They've spoken quite vehemently against it due to its it sort of goes back to something being natural again. Just because evolution is natural does not mean it is moral. And it really, to let people die like that is generally considered immoral. Die for the simple fact that they were born with a defect or they developed a defect. Homosexuality is and always has been deviant behavior that generally leads to disease rather than health. Yes, the AIDS epidemic was largely impacted gay communities, but that doesn't mean that heterosexuals didn't contract it either. I don't really see it as being a health issue. How does heterosexuality generally lead to health rather than disease? It's neither nor. It's a false equivalency. It has nothing to do with necessarily health, does it? Those who promote it always take the argument to love, but we can all know down deep that sex has little to do with love. You can have one without the other, which is true. The natural order should be preserved because it is essential for a stable civilization. Again, an appeal to nature, and I would just like to point out that if only around 3%, and that is rounding it up, of a population identifies as gay, that is not necessarily going to tumble civilizations if we allow that 3% to marry. You'd have to have a considerably more... It sort of harkens back to this notion that if we allow gay people to get married, then basically what's going to happen is a whole bunch of families are going to get divorces because they were really gay and they just settled for a opposite sex partner because they couldn't get married. And there is nothing to substantiate such beliefs. Slapping a married label on a gay union doesn't change the nature of the union. It's still unnatural. Again, it's still wrong in the eyes of God, his words, not mine, and it is still harmful to society in general. You have yet to demonstrate exactly how it is harmful to society in general. Are you afraid, like I said before, that allowing them to marry will cause previously thought normal or straight people to become gay, just simply because gay marriage is allowed? And also the appeal to religion, basically. You don't have anything much else to stand on at this point. But more to the point, since the Constitution doesn't address marriage at all, the Supreme Court has no business interfering in the matter. Laws regarding marriage belong to the states, not the federal government. Yeah, that's... It brings into the... it brings states' rights into the issue again. And I believe states should have a certain amount of authority to act on their own accord. TE5BWE says something that isn't being addressed. What happens to institutions that believe and practice their religious conviction that marriage is only between a man and a woman? We've seen what has happened to small business owners trying to stay true to their religious convictions. The state has punished them with malice. A ruling that changes the meaning of marriage will cause religious persecution to become the norm. No one will be allowed to worship with freedom of conscience. This slippery slope will be treacherous at best. Now, again, I believe this is a false equivalency. You are equating a small business that was open to serve the public sector, or everybody in that community, with a religious institution which is basically there to serve those identifying with that religion, right? For example, you're not going to go to a Jewish synagogue and ask the rabbi to perform a marriage ceremony for a Christian couple. Same goes with gay, because the majority... Okay, now this is an interesting point, though, that there could be Christian gays, but I believe the church would throw them out, and I don't know if you were Christian. I mean, if you were gay, why would you be Christian? You want to redefine it? Okay. Some sects of the faith do recognize... well, they're not openly hostile to gays. In which case, there would be no problem, right? So basically, this is concerning with these... This person is concerned about institutions, religious institutions, that currently do not accept gays or gay marriage, right? So if a gay was a part of this religion, you would think that they would naturally gravitate towards a religion that actually tolerate. It's not a different religion; it's just a different sect of Christianity, let's say. But yes, there's an inkling of truth in this, and I wouldn't say it's exactly slippery when you're comparing a business that is primarily in place to support or to provide a service to all the people in that community, as opposed to a religious institution that is there to serve just the religious of that community. Do or Die says, with the government as corrupt as it is, arguments heard before the Supreme Court, which votes along political lines instead of the actual Constitution, is a complete waste of time because the outcome will be solely based on what political side they're on, or how much dirty info the liberals have on justices. I'm calling you out, John Roberts. What makes you think that only liberals... only liberals have the dirty laundry on justices? It sounds quite one-sided to me, because I would say both sides demonstrate an incredible level of corruption, although I believe that the administrations have become more transparent as the propagation of information has become easier, especially with the advent of the internet. So we probably live now in a society that is less corrupt than at any other point in human history, if you take the governments in aggregate. Ramjar says, redefinition, the doctrine of deception that even our founders knew would destroy this nation from within. The sole reason Noah Webster spent years finding the foundation of words for a dictionary, a tool barely used in any format today, was to make certain they would not be redefined. What makes you think people don't use dictionaries? Or are you just worried that they don't use Webster's dictionary? Anyway, Noah Webster apparently attached Bible verses to every word, defined to make sure that we understood that God is the real foundation of truth, and that the only way we remained in line with God was knowing what is of God and what is not. I haven't verified that. It could very well be that Webster cited every verse to the Bible, so what? If you're making the claim that the Bible is the real foundation of truth, then what about all the contradictions it contains? There's a whole lot of baggage associated with calling the Bible the real fountain of truth, and I'm not sure you want to stumble down that path. God created the original separation of church, high priest, and state, king leadership, and humanity has done everything in its power to replace God with fleshy value, agendas, and immoralities. No, I believe that we have sought to replace what we previously called God with knowledge. Basically, what people would previously consider an act of God, we try to explain through science, right? As the gaps in human knowledge have shrunk, so has the role of God in our lives. It's basically the God of the gaps fallacy. Another reason for term limits on judges as well as for Congress. And they go on to cite a Bible verse because, with Christians, citing your own holy book proves everything. It is essential in all our learning, whether by reading or study or in classes and conversations, that we keep the goals of wisdom in mind, and goes on to quote more Bible verses. Gary Nova says, I'm for gay marriage because I have nothing against gay people, and I don't understand why I'm supposed to. Why would I care if they're married? It doesn't affect me at all. If you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, so be it. I don't care about that either. Again, your belief does not affect me, but why would you deny equal protection under the law for those seeking to practice what they believe, yet are being prevented by the government? It seems un-American to me. That's why I think there's no question how the court is going to rule. Now, this is interesting. It's basically saying that if a law does not personally affect me, I'm all in favor of it, which is a very dangerous position to take on the matter, because there are plenty of laws that are passed that would be detrimental to society as a whole that may not impact you directly. So, in addition to that, there is the fact that why would you deny equal protection under the law for those seeking to practice their beliefs, right? What if their beliefs contradict what we consider moral in today's society? For example, there were religions in Central America that sacrificed people to their gods. That is not moral by any standard in today's society. That's not acceptable. And suppose that there was a religion that called for the sacrifice of your firstborn. I mean, these are radical examples, but I'm saying there are limits to the freedom of the ability to practice your religion. in America. The Renegade says, as a libertarian, I have to wonder why the state is involved at all. One would think that the separation of church and state would entail leaving up religious matrimony to the church. If we're all honest, we'd all know that the only reason the state ever got involved was for tax purposes, which is likely true, but as someone who'd also consider myself a more socially conscious libertarian, I'm all in favor of leaving matrimony to the church or to other religious institutions and just redefining it, just throwing it out, the wording in the legislation out that defines marriage, and just reducing it to a social or a domestic partnership. BBYRD House says, listen, if the SCOTUS deems that marriage includes same-sex partnerships or unions, here's how it might affect the right of preachers and or churches to decline in participation of same-sex marriages. I imagine they will first lose their tax-exempt status, which you can get mad at me if you want, but many churches have unknowingly sold themselves to the government because they depend on their tax-exempt status. However, after seeing the treatment of businesses who choose not to participate in same-sex marriages or provide services for them, I believe that there will be much persecution of churches and preachers in our future. I suspect that this is the greater goal of the liberal and progressive agenda, to further rid society of any semblance of God, the Bible, or morality. I find it rather ironic that you put the Bible and God in the same sentence with morality. If there is anything less moral, it is the Bible. It's one of the least moral books that has been historically preserved. The genocide that the God of the Old Testament calls for, and so the permission of slavery, and there is a whole bundle of things, there are a whole bundle of problems that are wrong with the Bible and with God's very bad attitude towards people in general. Now, this is interesting that they mention the tax-exempt status that churches have, and often churches have been accused of abusing this tax-exempt status, which is why the Freedom from Religion Foundation will often sort of be a watchdog on these congregations to make sure that the preachers are not actually violating their tax-exempt status by talking politics in church. And it is interesting that people are against this because, for example, my parents are religious, and they are in favor of removing the church's tax-exempt status so that the church can talk politics. So I think that is a growing sentiment among the religious that the church should renounce its tax-exempt status, and I think everyone would be happy, because I haven't heard a lot of atheists that are necessarily crazy with the fact that churches have this tax-exempt status. Be Like Trey says, this is a monster of the government's own doing. I could care one whit what folks decide to do privately, and that is exactly what this should be, private. Why government gets a say at all should irritate us all. Why not just quit recognizing marriage at all, government, and treat everything like a private contract? That's really what we expect in the courts and government to accomplish, to protect an environment in which legal contracts are upheld. Heck, if you want to enter into a polygamous relationship, private contract. Redefining marriage seems a bit heavy-handed when government should just butt out altogether, and the government benefits for marriage should be dumped too. I'm not an advocate of IRS social engineering. Yes, now this is interesting because it is in the interest of the government to ensure that we have a birth rate that can replace the people who die, right? For example, we have Japan with a very low birth rate, and it's actually become a problem that their population is aging, and there are no children to replace the people who are dying. Now, so if you have to understand here, if the government does away with benefits for families, tax breaks, it is going to negatively affect families. It means that there will be fewer families because people need more collateral to be able to afford to raise a family. You get tax credits right now for if you have a certain number. Every child, you get additional tax credits for them. So this will this will disincentivize having children in the U.S. Now in turn, not the wage gap, that dwindling percentage will mean that we need more immigration. And it's funny because most of the people that you'd see, libertarian, conservative, etc., Republican, they're very against immigration. So if you're not going to let more immigrants into the country, and you're also going to disincentivize people having children by removing any tax breaks that are given to families, because now more than ever families are struggling due to the current economy, and so it'll hit middle and lower class families very hard if you got rid of these tax breaks that you're advocating for. Crazy Travis says, with 36 states having gay marriage, it's hard to see the SCOTUS ruling against gay marriage. Probably 5-4 with Kennedy as the decider, or maybe 6-3 if Roberts votes with the majority. That's just an observation. Not really an opinion piece. Well, okay. It's an opinion saying that it's probably going to pass. Mapache, let's say, I think the best way out of this is to get the government out of marriage. The government can perform civil unions for straight and gay couples to cover all the legal rights and responsibilities. And then if a same-sex couple wants, they can find a denomination that performs same-sex quote-unquote marriages on their own. If the SCOTUS declares gay marriage to be a right, would clergy of denominations that do not accept gay marriage be forced to perform such a marriage, or lose their tax-exempt status, or be sued like the cake couple? I've already covered my thoughts on this, and it was a few paragraphs up. Yes, I believe that we should leave the definition marriage to the religious communities and just extend the benefits that currently are only extended to marriages to any domestic partnership. So that takes care of that article. And there's some good opinion pieces here. They probably collected the best of the best. I know sometimes it is sort of a shitstorm on social media when articles are posted and people just comment. But these are some rather insightful ones, and I hope that you appreciated my take on it. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, farewell.